The grand, sweeping spectacle of the 19th of May, 2018 was universally broadcast and breathlessly received as the ultimate modern realization of a global fairy tale. When the world watched Meghan Markle glide up the ancient stone steps of St. George's Chapel in Windsor, bathed in the benevolent spring sunlight and draped in pristine Givenchy silk, a collective, romantic illusion took hold of the public imagination. We were told, and millions eagerly believed, that we were witnessing a profound institutional modernization, a desperately needed breath of fresh, egalitarian air sweeping through the dusty, rigid corridors of the British monarchy. It was branded as a £32 million celebration of diversity, of boundary-breaking love, and of a progressive future for the House of Windsor. But behind the towering floral arches, beneath the soaring, vaulted ceilings of the chapel, and hidden from the thousands of weeping, cheering spectators lining the long walk, the raw, unedited, and deeply unsettling reality was already beginning to fracture. Long before the devastating, globally syndicated Oprah Winfrey encounter that set the royal family ablaze, and years before the spectacular, humiliating collapse of their multi-million-dollar Spotify empire, the deep, structural cracks in Meghan Markle's bridal mask were already glaringly visible to those trapped behind the palace gates. Today, as the calendar turns to the crisp, unforgiving days of early April 2026, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex find themselves trapped in a suffocating, self-made fortress in Montecito. Meghan Markle is reportedly spiraling into a state of absolute, unprecedented panic as a relentless, unstoppable wave of newly unearthed exposures threatens to completely dismantle the very foundation of her meticulously curated public identity. The man leading this devastating forensic charge is none other than Tom Bower, the veteran, famously ruthless, investigative biographer whose mere name sends involuntary shudders down the spines of the global elite. Bower is not a tabloid gossip columnist trading in anonymous whispers or fleeting social media rumors. He is a formidable, legally bulletproof historian of scandal, and he is currently weaponizing a lethal, undeniable combination of insider testimonies to paint a terrifying portrait of a woman whose entire public existence is built upon a precarious, rotting scaffolding of calculated lies. He has gathered on-the-record statements from deeply disgruntled former palace staff, highly placed courtiers, and senior aristocratic figures, allegedly including members of the extended royal family who have finally lost their patience with the endless Californian grievances. For nearly a decade, Meghan has aggressively and successfully sold the world a very specific, highly lucrative narrative. She positioned herself as the ultimate reluctant royal, the innocent, wide-eyed American actress who wandered blindly into the lion's den of the British establishment, completely unaware of the crushing protocols, oblivious to the media scrutiny, and ultimately preyed upon by a cold, archaic, and deeply racist institution. But as the spring of 2026 unfolds, bringing with it a torrent of verifiable documentary evidence that victimhood mask has not merely slipped, it has been violently and permanently shattered into a million unfixable pieces. From her highly calculated, predatory hunt for Prince Harry in the private clubs of London, to her tyrannical, deeply offensive demands behind the scenes of their taxpayer-funded wedding, the unvarnished, brutal truth is finally catching up with the Duchess, and it is entirely rewriting the history of the modern monarchy. The absolute central pillar of Meghan's carefully monetized victim narrative is the astonishing claim she made while sitting across from Oprah Winfrey in that manicured Californian garden. She looked directly into the camera lens, projecting an aura of absolute innocence, and stated that she did not know much about the royal family, explicitly claiming that she never even Googled Prince Harry before their first date. Tom Bower's exhaustive research, heavily supported by the quiet, undeniable testimonies of prominent socialites and power brokers, deeply embedded in London's elite circles, tells a diametrically, horrifyingly opposite story. According to Bower's meticulous timeline, What insiders now refer to as Operation Royal did not begin with a serendipitous blind date in 2016. It began as early as 2013. After her starter marriage to Hollywood film producer Trevor Engelson collapsed and her career on the basic cable legal drama Suits plateaued, Meghan did not just accidentally stumble upon a vulnerable British prince. She hunted one. Bauer alleges with chilling specificity that Meghan meticulously, surgically researched Prince Harry's deepest psychological vulnerabilities and emotional triggers. She knew exactly what his weaknesses were. She knew he was a man still profoundly, actively grieving the tragic death of his mother, Princess Diana. She knew he was deeply obsessed with the continent of Africa as a spiritual refuge. She knew he was desperately seeking a partner to validate his humanitarian ambitions and fuel his underlying, simmering rebellion against the strictures of the firm. When she finally secured that highly coveted introduction at a private, exclusive club in Soho, London, she was not acting like a television star on a casual date. She was executing a highly prepared psychological sting operation. She played the role of the deeply empathetic, humanitarian soulmate so absolutely perfectly that Harry, a man who had been isolated by his own trauma and desperate for a maternal, guiding figure, was hooked on the very first night. Friends from her own past, childhood acquaintances, and her extensive, previously deleted digital social media footprints paint a picture of a woman deeply, intensely fascinated by British high society and the glamorous allure of the monarchy long before she ever crossed paths with the Duke of Sussex. Bauer characterizes her highly publicized innocence not as a genuine reality, but as a masterful, Oscar-worthy performance, undoubtedly the greatest, most successful, and most lucrative role of her entire acting career. She identified a target who was emotionally adrift. She tailored her entire personality to match his exact psychological deficits, and she convinced him that she was the only person in the world who truly understood his pain. The 2018 royal wedding was presented to the global public as a magnificent, groundbreaking symbol of modern unity, a blending of cultures that would supposedly drag the ancient British monarchy into the 21st century. But behind the heavy, gilded doors of the palace, the preparation for the event was a brutal, exhausting battleground of sheer, unadulterated ego and towering entitlement. One of the most chilling, deeply symbolic details that Bauer has unearthed involves Meghan's specific, highly demanding choice of transport on the morning of her wedding. On that bright May morning, Meghan arrived at the steps of St. George's Chapel in a vintage Rolls-Royce Phantom IV. To the untrained, casual observer watching the television broadcast, it was just a beautiful, classic automobile fitting for a royal bride. But in the highly coded, historically loaded world of royal protocol, it was a loaded weapon. The Rolls-Royce Phantom IV is one of the rarest, most historically significant vehicles in the royal muse, with only 18 having ever been produced. But far more importantly, it was the preferred signature vehicle of Wallis Simpson, the infamous American divorcee who caused the catastrophic abdication of King Edward VIII and nearly destroyed the British monarchy in 1936. Insider sources from within the royal garages claim that the royal household, deeply aware of the historical optics, had strongly suggested several other traditional, highly secure vehicles for the bride's journey. Meghan reportedly refused every single alternative, absolutely insisting on the Phantom IV and refusing to back down. While some naive commentators might attempt to dismiss this as a bizarre coincidence, Bauer and veteran palace insiders see it as a highly calculated, deeply aggressive psychological jab. Meghan was sending a deliberate, unavoidable signal directly to Queen Elizabeth II and the entire institution. She was the new Wallis. She was a disruptor who would not be tamed, managed, or silenced by their ancient rules. It was an act of pure, breathtaking condescension that cast a long, cold, and deeply disrespectful shadow over the entire sacred ceremony. If the choice of the wedding car was a subtle, historical message meant to unnerve the courtiers, Meghan's treatment of the ancient St. George's Chapel itself was an overt, staggering, an almost incomprehensible insult to the very fabric of British history. Reports initially leaked by highly respected journalists and now heavily detailed and corroborated in Bower's latest findings reveal a moment of Hollywood arrogance that left the palace staff entirely speechless. During a walkthrough of the chapel, Meghan allegedly declared that the 500-year-old historic monument, the sacred resting place of 10 British monarchs, including King Henry VIII and King Charles I, had a musty, old smell that she found entirely unacceptable for her special day. Her proposed solution to this perceived indignity was to aggressively demand that her staff use commercial, synthetic Glade air fresheners and atomizers to spray the entire interior of the chapel before the celebrity guests arrived. The palace staff, absolutely horrified and profoundly offended by the request to spray cheap, supermarket chemicals inside a consecrated, historically priceless monument, flatly and unconditionally refused the demand. This refusal led to what traumatized staff described as an absolute explosion of temper from the bride-to-be. This was not the understandable perfectionism of an anxious bride, Bower argues. It was pure, unadulterated totalitarianism. Meghan viewed centuries of sacred British heritage not as hallowed history to be respected, but as a dirty, musty film set that desperately needed to be sanitized to meet her superficial Los Angeles Hollywood standards. This specific, highly volatile incident became the ultimate catalyst for the mass exodus of seasoned royal aides who simply could not and would not handle her relentless, disrespectful bombardment of demands. And then there was the highly orchestrated, deeply symbolic walk down the aisle. Meghan famously insisted on walking the first half of the long, dramatic aisle of the chapel entirely alone. She claimed she wanted to project the image of a fierce, strong, independent feminist who did not need a traditional father figure to give her away, having already successfully and ruthlessly isolated her own biological father, Thomas Markle, from the event. But archival, unedited footage from the day shows a highly revealing moment where Meghan allegedly impatiently brushed aside a royal assistant who was merely trying to adjust her sprawling veil and gently guide her path. She needed the global camera feeds to see absolutely nothing but her, dominating the frame without any distracting royal staff in the shot. By the time she reached Prince Charles, who had graciously offered to walk her the rest of the way to the altar to save her from embarrassment, the narrative was already permanently set. She had successfully utilized the future King of England, a man who had spent his entire life preparing for the throne, as a mere convenient prop to facilitate her own spectacular solo entrance onto the world stage. Perhaps the most damaging, undeniable, and easily verifiable exposure to Meghan's credibility was the bizarre, entirely unnecessary claim she made to Oprah Winfrey regarding the actual marriage ceremony. She looked into the camera and stated that she and Harry were actually married by the Archbishop of Canterbury in the absolute privacy of their own backyard, a full 3 days before the global televised spectacle. It was a romantic, highly intimate story designed to show that they cared only for their love, not for the pomp and circumstance of the institution. And it was a complete, utter, and legally impossible fabrication. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself, Justin Welby, was forced into the highly uncomfortable position of breaking his traditional silence and publicly clarifying to the international press that the only legal, binding wedding took place on Saturday, May the 19th, inside the chapel, after the lie was embarrassingly publicly debunked by the highest-ranking cleric in the Church of England. The Sussex's scrambling public relations team had to frantically backtrack, releasing a statement calling the backyard event a private exchange of personal vows rather than a legal marriage. The obvious question remains, why tell such a provable, unnecessary lie to an audience of billions? Bower argues it is a classic, undeniable symptom of main character syndrome. She desperately needed to believe, and make the world believe, that the £32 million wedding was just a burdensome, exhausting spectacle forced upon her by a cold, demanding palace, while her real, authentic marriage was pure, private, and entirely on her own terms. In reality, she was the one who ruthlessly demanded every single penny of the grandeur, the celebrity-packed guest list, and the custom couture, while simultaneously disparaging the event to gain public sympathy as a victim of the system. To achieve this total suffocating control over Prince Harry, Meghan allegedly knew she had to systematically sever his anchors to his past, alienating him from anyone who might question her motives or challenge her authority. One of the most decisive, pivotal moments in Harry's tragic transformation occurred during a traditional shooting weekend at the Sandringham estate in late 2017. Harry, deeply eager and excited to introduce his new, glamorous fiancée to his oldest, most loyal friends, a tight-knit group of men he had known since his days at Eton College, and during his grueling, dangerous tours in the British Army, found himself hosting an absolute social disaster. According to Bauer's deeply sourced accounts from individuals present that weekend, Meghan did not just disagree with Harry's friends, she aggressively interrogated them. She reportedly challenged their aristocratic banter, their dark, traditional British humor, and their views on politics and feminism with a ferocious, combative, and entirely humorless energy that left the tight-knit group completely stunned and deeply uncomfortable. Harry's friends, many of whom are high-ranking aristocrats who value extreme discretion, loyalty, and thick-skinned camaraderie, left the weekend entirely convinced that Meghan was a catastrophic mistake. Their feedback to Harry was honest and brutal. They found her condescending, hypercritical, and utterly lacking in the self-deprecating humor required to survive in their circles. Instead of considering his lifelong friend's legitimate, protective concerns, Harry, now heavily and entirely under Meghan's hypnotic influence, distanced himself completely. Many of these brothers in arms, men who had literally bled with him in military service and kept his darkest secrets for decades, were pointedly, coldly excluded from the prestigious, highly sought-after post-wedding evening dinner at Frogmore House. Meghan had successfully, systematically branded them as toxic, backwards, and bigoted, effectively cutting Harry's most vital lifelines to his past and isolating him in a pristine, Californian echo chamber where she was his only trusted voice, his only confidant, and his only source of validation. She executed an identical, equally ruthless strategy with her own biological family. The world watched in absolute shock as her father, Thomas Markle, was cast as the ultimate unforgivable villain of the 2018 wedding narrative. While the global media focused intensely on his highly embarrassing, admittedly foolish staged paparazzi photos, Bauer reveals a much darker, colder, and deeply classist motivation behind the sudden estrangement. Bauer alleges that Meghan was deeply, profoundly ashamed of her father's unpolished, working-class, overweight appearance. She reportedly viewed the man who had paid for her elite private education and supported her early acting career as a massive visual liability to the high-gloss Hollywood royalty image she was meticulously cultivating for the covers of Vogue and Vanity Fair. In a shocking revelation that highlights the sheer empathy of the royal family compared to the bride, it is reported that King Charles, then the Prince of Wales, personally pleaded with Meghan to fly to the United States, privately reconcile with her ailing father, and stop the highly damaging public embarrassment before the wedding took place. Meghan allegedly flatly, coldly refused the future king's request, citing vague, unsubstantiated security concerns that the highly trained palace security staff found entirely hollow and ridiculous. Bauer argues this was a highly calculated aesthetic move. If Thomas Markle wasn't sitting in the front pew, he couldn't ruin the billionaire aesthetic of the broadcast. Doria Ragland, the quiet, compliant, and much more camera-ready parent, was brought in just 48 hours before the ceremony to maintain the illusion of a modern family narrative, while the rest of the Markle family, the people she actually grew up with, were left permanently banished in the wilderness, watching the spectacle on television like the rest of the world. But the ultimate, most explosive clash of wills happened not with friends or fathers, but deep inside the heavily guarded palace vaults. The incident, now infamously known as Tiara Gate, is often framed by Sussex supporters and sympathetic American journalists as a minor bridezilla moment that was blown wildly out of proportion by a hostile press. But Bauer's forensic investigation reveals it was actually the first great defining power struggle between Meghan Markle and the ultimate authority, Queen Elizabeth II. Meghan reportedly demanded an incredibly valuable, emerald-encrusted tiara specifically identified as the Greville Emerald Kokoschnik for her wedding day. When the Queen's deeply trusted, fiercely loyal dresser, Angela Kelly, politely informed the bride that the specific tiara was unavailable due to its unknown, highly sensitive provenance, and rumored historical links to the bloody Russian Revolution, Meghan went into full, unyielding combat mode. Harry's infamous, red-faced, screaming outburst to the royal staff, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets," wasn't just a sign of a stressed groom deeply in love. It was a terrifying symptom of the us-against-the-world siege mentality that Meghan had already successfully fostered deep within his psyche. The late Queen, recognizing the sheer, unprecedented disrespect and the terrifying lack of protocol being displayed in her own home, reportedly pulled her grandson aside and delivered a dressing down that reverberated through the palace. She told him with absolute, terrifying, sovereign firmness that Meghan cannot have whatever she wants and that she gets the tiara that she is given by the Queen. This was the exact chilling moment Meghan realized she could not outrank, outmaneuver, or successfully bully the reigning monarch. And, according to Bauer, it was the very moment the seed of resentment was planted, and she began aggressively, secretly planning her ultimate revenge against the entire institution that dared to tell her no. The intense friction behind the palace walls was not limited to jewelry selection. It was fundamentally about establishing dominance, and that power struggle extended directly to the future Queen of the United Kingdom, Princess Catherine. The most enduring, hotly debated scandal of the entire wedding buildup was the infamous bridesmaid dress incident. While Meghan tearfully, dramatically told Oprah Winfrey and a global audience of millions that Catherine had made her cry over the dresses, reversing the tabloid narrative to paint herself as the victim, Bauer's evidence tells the exact, undeniable opposite story. This evidence is sourced directly from the professional tailors, the royal aides, and the individuals actually standing in the room during the fitting. The staff present described Meghan's management style during the fittings as completely bombarding, aggressive, and entirely unsympathetic. She clashed viciously with a newly postpartum Kate over the fit of 3-year-old Princess Charlotte's dress, which was reportedly ill-fitting and required major alterations. Furthermore, Kate, strictly following established royal protocol, which dictates that young bridesmaids wear tights for highly formal, globally televised events, was met with a wall of aggressive, mocking defiance from Meghan, who insisted on bare legs. Meghan aggressively sought to establish herself as the new, modernizing Queen Bee, flatly refusing to bend to a protocol that Kate had spent years dutifully mastering. This intense, unnecessary conflict created an incredibly toxic atmosphere where palace staff literally avoided making direct eye contact with the Duchess of Sussex to escape her withering, hypercritical corrections. By later deliberately and maliciously reversing the narrative on the Oprah broadcast, Meghan sought to cast Catherine as a cold, unfeeling bully and herself as the fragile, vulnerable outsider. This lie was particularly damaging, and particularly cowardly, because Meghan knew with absolute certainty that Catherine was bound by the institutional rule of never complain, never explain, and could not publicly defend herself or correct the record without dragging the monarchy into a petty, undignified reality television feud. Meghan weaponized Catherine's dignified silence against her, a tactic that deeply, permanently infuriated Prince William. The toxicity of the Sussex household was not limited to clashes with senior royals. It was allegedly a daily nightmare for the people employed to serve them. In early 2021, a formal, highly confidential bullying investigation was launched by Buckingham Palace regarding Meghan's treatment of her personal staff following an official complaint filed by their own communications secretary. The results of this investigation were highly classified, locked away, and deliberately buried by the palace to avoid a public bloodbath. Until now. Bauer claims to have seen the suppressed fragments and read the agonizing witness summaries from that buried investigation. The descriptions of Meghan's behavior towards young, dedicated, enthusiastic staff members are harrowing. The report details individuals being routinely reduced to tears, physically shaking with anxiety before meetings, and feeling completely psychologically trapped by her relentless 5 a.m. email barrages, her unreasonable demands, and her tone-deaf, condescending reprimands. The most damaging part of this exposure is the staggering, almost unbelievable hypocrisy it reveals. While Meghan was aggressively pitching herself to the American media as a champion of mental health, filming glossy, highly produced charity segments about kindness, empathy, and global compassion, her own staff were reportedly suffering from severe psychological trauma behind the scenes, directly caused by her tyrannical management style. Bauer argues this carefully constructed mask of compassion is what she is most utterly paranoid about losing. As Meghan's public spiral continues to accelerate into the spring of 2026, the palace in London has shifted its strategy entirely. They are no longer bothering to defend themselves against the Sussexes' sporadic media attacks. They are meticulously documenting them. Under the increasingly firm executive leadership of King Charles and Prince William, the palace has adopted a terrifying Cold War stance. They have reportedly prepared a comprehensive, devastating counter-dossier that includes time-stamped communication logs, aggressive emails, sworn staff testimonies, and highly sensitive CCTV footage from the royal residences spanning 2018 to 2020. This dossier is the ultimate sword of Damocles, hanging directly by a thread over Meghan's head in California. If she or Harry attempt another televised attack, authorize another ghost-written memoir, or participate in another tell-all interview designed to damage the crown, the palace is reportedly ready and fully prepared to leak the bullying report in its absolute, unredacted entirety to the British press. Meghan is said to be terrified of this document because it is the one thing her highly paid Hollywood public relations team absolutely cannot spin. It is a factual, legal, human resources record of her toxicity, and its widespread release would instantly and permanently end her lucrative humanitarian brand, rendering her completely unhireable in the corporate philanthropic sector. By early April 2026, the glittering Sussex sparkle has completely calcified into a toxic, isolating Montecito mist. The historic, heavily publicized $100 million Netflix deal, which was the absolute centerpiece of their supposed financial independence, is currently lying in absolute ruins. Industry insiders operating within the major streaming platforms paint a pathetic, exhausting picture of creative bankruptcy and wildly unmet expectations. While the initial Harry and Meghan documentary was a massive ratings hit, television executives clearly understand that it was fueled entirely by the cynical selling of royal trauma, a deeply negative currency that can only be spent once before the audience becomes completely desensitized. Subsequent, highly touted projects were quietly scrapped, delayed, or utterly ignored by the public. Hollywood executives are notoriously, famously unsentimental. They do not care about royal titles if those titles do not generate massive, sustained subscription revenue. Bauer forcefully argues that Meghan's entire brand failed so spectacularly because she did not actually want to create art, produce meaningful content, or do the grueling, unglamorous work of running a production company. She simply wanted a globally financed platform to endlessly curate and validate her own image. When the general public inevitably grew utterly exhausted of the endless, whining victim narrative from two incredibly wealthy people living in a mansion, the spectacled Duchess found she had absolutely nothing else of value to sell. The haunting ghost of the Spotify collapse, where a top podcast executive famously and publicly labeled them as grifters, continues to follow her into every pitch meeting, poisoning the well before she even sits down. In 2026, the harsh reality is that the entertainment industry sees Meghan not as a visionary storyteller, but as a difficult, demanding content vacuum who catastrophically failed to deliver on her massive, unprecedented price tag. So, what is the ultimate endgame for the Duchess of Sussex? One of Tom Bower's most explosive, heavily debated theories involves Meghan's long-term, calculated exit strategy. He suggests, based on a rigorous analysis of her historical relationship patterns, that Meghan's loyalty is tied strictly to upward utility, not to deep emotional connection. She outgrew and discarded her first husband, Trevor Engelson, the exact moment her acting career on Suits finally took off and she relocated to Canada. She outgrew, discarded, and publicly humiliated her own father when his blue-collar, unpolished image became a visual liability to her royal ambitions. And she outgrew and discarded her royal duties the absolute second they restricted her ability to financially monetize her brand and demanded silent service over public adoration. Now, in the spring of 2026, the brutal assessment is that Prince Harry's utility is rapidly reaching its final expiration date. Harry was never the equal partner in Meghan's eyes, Bower argues. He was the passport, the ultimate golden stepping stone to global fame. Now that the royal connection has been completely legally severed, his cherished military titles stripped away, his familial relationships burned to ash, and the fantasy of him as a modern Diana debunked, he is just an angry, traumatized man with an immense amount of emotional baggage and rapidly dwindling financial resources. Deeply sourced rumors have significantly intensified that Meghan is currently quietly networking within the high-stakes, ruthless, and incredibly wealthy circles of tech billionaires, media moguls, and venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, deliberately leaving Harry behind in Montecito. Bower's investigation suggests she is actively looking for a richer, shinier, far more powerful billionaire, someone with significantly deeper pockets than a financially cut-off prince, and a wider global network completely unburdened by the restrictions of British royal protocol. If Harry is no longer useful as a bridge to global power and limitless wealth, Bower predicts a swift, incredibly ruthless conscious uncoupling. She will undoubtedly utilize her PR machine to frame the divorce as a journey of personal growth and female empowerment, escaping a damaged man, but Bower frames it simply as predatory evolution. She will leave the spare completely in the dust of his own making, moving on to her next host. Prince Harry is now widely seen within British and American circles as a deeply tragic, isolated satellite, lost completely in the gravitational pull of Meghan's ambition. Without the formidable institutional protection of the firm and entirely lacking the unwavering, lifelong support of his brother, he is an exile in every sense of the word. Deeply credible reports leaking from London suggest that Harry has recently made tentative, desperate, back-channel reach-outs to his brother, the Prince of Wales, seeking some form of connection or forgiveness as his American life crumbles. But the response from Kensington Palace remains absolutely terrifyingly icy. The palace has successfully moved on. The Harry-shaped hole in the royal family has been seamlessly, effectively filled by the heads-down dedication of the working royals and the immense, globally recognized popularity of the Wales children. The institution has proven it does not need him to survive. The ultimate devastating consequence for Meghan Markle in 2026 is not merely a string of legal defeats or canceled podcast contracts, it is total, unmitigated social bankruptcy. The A-list Hollywood royalty who eagerly, breathlessly filled the ancient pews at St. George's Chapel for the spectacle of the decade, the Oprahs, the Clooneys, the Serenas, have completely, silently distanced themselves. They recognize that associating with the Sussex brand is now a massive reputational hazard, and they absolutely do not want to become collateral damage in a messy, endless, and deeply unpopular war between a constantly complaining Duchess and the reigning King of England. Meghan's highly cultivated truth has become a late-night television punchline. When the Archbishop of Canterbury and international news agencies like Reuters are utilized as verified footnotes in an investigative biography exposing your constant lies, you lose the one single thing a celebrity absolutely requires to survive in the modern media landscape: basic believability. Tom Bower's final, overarching assessment serves as a chilling historical warning. By arrogantly branding her £32 million taxpayer-funded wedding, a mere spectacle for the world during her Oprah interview, Meghan thought she was sounding delightfully authentic, grounded, and relatable to an American audience. Instead, she conclusively proved to the British public that she was unimaginably, breathtakingly ungrateful for the immense privilege bestowed upon her. History will ultimately record the 2018 royal wedding, not as a joyous moment of institutional modernization, but as the greatest, most expensive royal heist of the 21st century. A massive, globally televised marketing campaign funded entirely by the British taxpayer for the sole purpose of launching a private, commercial brand. Her aggressive, symbolic attempt to use the Rolls-Royce Phantom IV to signal to the establishment that she was the new, untamable Wallis Simpson has backfired spectacularly. Instead of being romanticized as a glamorous rebel queen who chose love over duty, she is widely seen as Wallis without the impeccable style, without the unwavering devotion of her husband, and entirely without the essential virtue of loyalty. As the sun sets over the sprawling, increasingly quiet Montecito estate this April, the air is thick with the horrifying realization of failure. The global brand is actively, visibly decomposing. Meghan Markle came into the royal family loudly demanding to be worshipped as the new Queen of Hearts, but she behaved entirely like the demanding, tyrannical director of a low-budget reality production. She treated the most historic, revered institution in the world as a mere stepping stone to a Hollywood throne that ultimately, decisively refused to seat her. Today, she is a shadow duchess, desperately hiding from the Bower apocalypse, while the deeply damaged man she hunted sits entirely alone in a gilded cage of his own making, permanently isolated from the only family that ever truly loved and protected him. The fairy tale is dead, the spectacle is over, and as Tom Bower's final devastating pages turn, the world is left with one undeniable, unshakable fact. The truth always, eventually, finds its way through the Glade spray.